Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Survivor Stockwatch podcast. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and with me this week to talk through the penultimate episode of Survivor Season 44 and rate the players based on how well we think they are doing in the game is Maggie. How you doing, Maggie?
Hi, Taran. I'm good. I moved since the last time we spoke, so that was a lot that happened in my life. And I'm really liking the season, and I'm excited to talk to you because I have feelings about Survivor overall and like viewing experiences and just all of it. So I'm excited to get into it.
All right. I have a soundbite, but I don't remember what it was, but I remembered that I wanted to play it at the beginning of this podcast.
Where good things happen.
Yes.
Yes, this is the podcast where good things happen.
Nice save.
I don't remember the second one either, if I'm being honest. I think it's something.
That's how you do it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I like that one.
That's how you do it.
I think that you should save that one for the upcoming BB season.
The Big Brother US has live feeds.
That's how you do it.
Hey, well,
Boom.
it's such a shame, Taran, that like we missed out on covering Big Brother Canada. It's so sad. I didn't even get to. We didn't get to do anything. We missed you so much. So sad that Big Brother Canada 11 didn't exist.
Yeah, got canceled.
It's so sad.
It's a shame. We are here to talk about Survivor, though. Survivor episode 12. And this has been a weird season, I think. But this episode was kind of interesting, where we basically saw the Tika 3 now in control after winning the day in the previous episode, but starting to potentially take aim at themselves, as we see that the Jam is taking a look at Carolyn, of all people, that he might need to take out Carolyn at the final 6, but ultimately does not. And instead we see Jamie, which, who knew that Jamie would not win this game?
I am the most valuable person that anybody could ever interact with.
Somehow lost.
I think that it will be, a cold day in HE double hockey sticks when you get a sound bite like that out of me if I'm on a reality show.
I don't know. I think I can do anything.
I can do anything at this point.
I would be like, no dodo music for me. No fall from grace for me. I'm not giving you losers anything.
I mean, would they cast you?
No, and they shouldn't.
That's the thing. Yeah.
They shouldn't. For my mental health and for theirs. They should not.
I think they mostly are just going to cast the people that will give them the I'm the most valuable and the
and we love them for it, and that's why we're here to talk about them.
I'm sad we didn't get more Jamie throughout the season. I feel like not only was she a very fun character, but like she clearly operates on a very strategic level. Like whether you agree with her strategy or not, she is very much thinking game a lot. You can tell based on the way she played the game and based on the way she talks about the game in her exit interviews that like she's a very strategic player. And I think she could have been a very fun. I mean, she was a very fun character, but I feel like we could have had more from Jamie.
I agree. I think that the problem is that this is a season full of like really fun characters. Like this is a very character heavy season. And when you have so many people who are like kooky and fun, some of the less kooky and fun people fall by the wayside,
Yeah. Well, the episode is fairly straightforward. I think we see they split up. They go to the sanctuary where there's sandwiches and nothing of too much importance happens there.
and feet rubbing.
Yes, I did think about this. They're getting foot massages, and Then Jam Jam's like, my game brain is turning on. And
Where you going? Where you going, this Taran?
I was just thinking about like, whether you're a foot massager or a food server or whatever, if you're like a worker at the sanctuary, you're like doing your job, right? And I imagine like not related to Survivor production. I imagine they just hired like these people to come in. And so you're like just doing this is just like you're like you typically probably work at like a massage place, regular job. And they're like, no, we got this production crew. They want you to come out to this little hut called the Sanctuary to massage 3 people's feet who have been living on a beach for 25 days or whatever. Like, first of all, like, oof, right? Like I hope they're getting some bonus pay on that one. Second, you're then doing it, and in the middle of you doing it, they start talking strategic gameplay about how they're voting each other out, and like, no, but we can work together. And you're just like massaging their feet. It must be such a weird experience.
Yeah. Wow. I've never thought too deeply about like the people who work at the sanctuary, but now you're, expanding my mind to a whole other aspect of Survivor production. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know that they like I would imagine that those women who were the foot massagers, um I can't believe we're talking about this so much. I
This
I
is what
imagine
people
that
listen to the Stockwatch podcast for,
I
Maggie.
know. Isn't this supposed to be like heavy on the strategy? I imagine that they probably don't understand what they're saying, either because they don't speak English or because they don't speak English super fluently or because like they're talking about strategic gameplay and they have no context whatsoever.
Oh,
So I
it's like when I was a kid and a bunch of my friends played World of Warcraft, but I didn't. And so anytime they talked about World of Warcraft for hours at a time, I'd just be like, Why am I here? You're just
Yeah,
speaking gibberish
Taryn.
in front of me."
It's exactly like that. I pulled that reference out just to hear that. Yes. It's World of Warcraft from Taryn's third grade. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
like, uh, like, all
Wow,
right. Well,
Taryn.
once we get to fire making it 4, it's like, what are you talking about? Who
Yeah.
making fire at 4? What's 4? What do you mean?
Wow, Taryn, we have not podcasted together in a long time because I'm already like I'm in it now. We're here. We're talking. We're 8 minutes in and we're already talking deeply about the foot massager's backstory.
That was my favorite part of the episode. Thinking about the foot massagers.
I liked the episode overall and I really like this season a lot. I think that there are 2 types. Well, there's many types of like these seasons of reality shows based off of the contestants. Um, but I do think that there is a big difference between a season where there's one person who is so strategically heads and tails above the rest that like everybody is rooting for them and you're like they are the player of the season, like oh my gosh. And there's a very different viewing experience in a season like that, like we had in Survivor 40, like I personally had in Survivor 43 with Jesse,
Mhm.
or versus a season like this where there's a group of people driving the strategy. And yes, there are, we're here right now to talk about the small details of who's doing better here, who's doing better here, but there's a much wider spread of me as viewer. If any one of the Tika 3 win, I'm thrilled. I'm like, this is a great season. It stuck the landing. I'm sure in order to get us there has to be, twists and turns, and maybe they don't all end up at this final tribal, but I feel certain going into this finale that I'm going to be happy with the outcome because I feel like my happiness of who will win is spread out versus a season like last season when it was so Jesse heavy at the end, and Jesse had just made these moves that were so amazing and so intense. I was like, if Jesse doesn't win, I will be so mad. And when Jesse lost last season, if I had not been with my friend, I am not kidding, I would have turned off the television. That is how angry I got. Mike Bloom has my angry text to prove it. Like, I just feel like the viewing experience has been so different this season, and I'm really like enjoying it a lot more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think in terms of giving options, yeah, I think for sure. Like I think most people can find somebody in Tika to root for, whether you love the sort of jovial social game of Jam Jam or the like authentic wackiness that is also very strategic, that is Carolyn, or the sort of like nerdy, sort of understated, very strategic and social Carson. I think that like there's a lot of different kinds of Survivor viewers that like
Yes.
those people can represent and sort of people can latch onto and in thinking about like how they might play the game. And so I think that's pretty fun. And they're all like pretty great television,
Mhm.
especially Carolyn, I think. And a Jam Jam's great. And I think Carson's like a great sort of uh uh person to bounce off of them because like he seems so like almost like boring in comparison to them at times,
Mhm.
but then he'll get into confessional, be like, this is my chaos side, like I'm loving this too. And he's, I think, clearly doing a lot of like the groundwork to make sure that like they stay together and function very well and like ride to the end. So I think it's definitely a fun crew. It just to briefly go into my regular complaints about the editing, but like it makes me wish that we had a more cohesive narrative throughout the season following these three. um, I think about like Cook Islands and how the wow, I don't remember the tribe name now, but the
The four.
the
Mhm.
four was like that was like the storyline, and you followed it through as they survived week to week, and like I feel like if we had just leaned in a little more and had a more long-term storyline rather than kind of like the individualized episode storylines, this would be even more fun. But I think in terms of how the game has played out, it's been very, very fun. And I think casting, as always, is just knocked it out of the park.
Well, and I think that yes, to all of those points. I have to say that as the person in all of her friend groups who everybody knows is obsessed with reality TV, fringe people who I didn't know were watching Survivor have been texting me about how much they love Carolyn. Like, I think
Mhm.
Carolyn has tapped into something within the cultural zeitgeist that's going on right now, and people just adore her. My sister-in-law is completely obsessed with Carolyn. Every single week she texts me of all of her thoughts about Carolyn and how amazing she's doing and how much she loves her, sends me her TikToks. Like, she there's just something about her that people really really connect with, like all different types of people really connect with. And I'm sure that that has to do with her deep authenticity. She just is herself in all aspects. But I think that part of it, like what you're talking about with the edit, watching them go all the way through, I feel like we've gotten that late game. I feel like I've been watching the Tika 3 for the past 4 or 5 episodes here, like really navigate their way through with some really strong gameplay. And they are all so different, but they have all been like very committed to one another, even when they betray each other. Like, because I hate the thing about Survivor that drives me absolutely bananas. Like, the reason why last season when Survivor was over, I was like, I hate Survivor and I'm never watching it again, is because I feel sometimes like it's so random and it feels like such BS because of random game mechanics. Like, it
Mhm.
drives me up a wall. Like, sometimes there's just no way for somebody to maneuver because of something like fire, or because if they do, the way that Survivor is played now is that, God forbid you make a self-interested move, you're voted out the very next vote. And so it's sort of, to me, sometimes it feels like the people who have laid down and died for the most of the game are usually the ones who end up at the end. And of course, people will say that is a great strategy, and it is definitely a strategy to get to the end, and that is the way that you play Survivor. But I like when I'm watching these shows, people to take the reins and to really be in control of their own game. And because Tika has been able to do it in a threesome, they have had way more maneuvering power, or much more maneuvering power, because not one of them is popping their head above to get it chopped off the next episode. Since they're moving in a unit, they're able to sort of evade being too far out front, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is like and I think the main point of this episode is like who gets the most credit for it, both in and out of the game. And we started the episode with Carson seeming to have the big target on his back, which was a surprise to me because from the previous episode, they were talking about Jam Jam as the big end game threat. He's too likable. We need to take out Jam Jam. Then Jam Jam wins immunity, and consolation prize, we need to target Carson, even though we don't want to. We need to target Carson. Then Carson survives. Jam Jam's now available once again, but almost because seemingly because they've now been focused on getting Carson out and they failed to get Carson out. Now it's like, well, Carson's the big threat. we failed to get Carson out, so now Carson's the big threat. Except that doesn't last very long either, because Jam Jam comes in with his own perception of who the big threat is, which seems to not be the general consensus amongst the rest of the tribe. Like we see that Heidi, Lauren, and Jamie, Heidi, Jamie, and Carolyn are all talking about Carson. So Heidi and Jamie clearly on that page. Lauren, I think, also seems to be on that page. In fact, when Jamie goes to Lauren later in the episode saying, "Hey, we got to get out Carolyn. She's the big threat," Lauren was like, I mean, I guess so. I mean, if Jam Jams wants to vote Carolyn, I'll vote Carolyn. But it didn't seem like she was like, oh, yes, thank God we're going to get Carolyn out. So it seemed as though the non-Tikas were on board, were all on the same page that Carson is the big threat. But then Jam Jam comes in and he's worried that Carolyn's the big threat. I imagine because she played the idol, and, he just feels like, she's, I guess, doing too much. It's a weird read to me. Because I felt like that hasn't been the case. And if anything, like the whole point of the tribal council of the previous episode was about how people weren't respecting Carolyn and her game, and how people were talking about like, well, Jeff, I think some people aren't freaking out every tribal because we just we have some experience, in the game and of these things. And Carolyn's like, I'm sitting right here. Like, I've probably been to more tribals than you have.
Yeah. I actually disagree with that, Karen. I think that Jam Jam, well, yes, all of those things that you said are definitely true, but I disagree that you are like, I don't know where Jam Jam's perspective in that is coming from, because I think he watched Carolyn walk over with her idol, watched the entire jury freak out, get totally excited and thrilled, watched Franny hit the person next to her, watch Matt turn around to Franny and start laughing, he could see how into it they were. Carolyn gets back, tells this incredible story about how she found it, how she was so smart to do all of this stuff. I think that Jam Jam is not thinking about the way that he feels about Carolyn. He's thinking about the way that he watched the jury react to Carolyn and the way that she just told this super epic story when she got back. And he's like, if they already feel that way about her and she can tell a story like this, I might be in some trouble. And I actually feel like Jam Jam is the person who has been with Carolyn, the only person left in the game who has been with Carolyn the entire time, who has seen the highs and the lows of her game, who has watched her, has a complete, I think Jam Jam has a true understanding of who Carolyn is as a game player and as a character on Survivor. And that's why he's threatened by her, because he sees the full picture and he sees that she is very capable of winning.
I mean, I don't disagree. I do think that Carolyn is capable of winning, and I don't disagree either that, like, I think watching the jury, celebrate the idol play is meaningful. That said, ultimately the idol play wasn't a necessary one, and the jury thought it might be, I think, at the time. And I would say, like, overall, if we're talking about, like, again, the sort of the vibe of the tribe itself, they are feeling like Carson or even Jam Jam, those are the people that have been talked about as threats. And you have people on the jury like Danny and Brandon who have shown multiple times that they haven't really respected Carolyn's game, which again is not to say that I don't think she can win. And I think she absolutely can, especially after this episode. But I think to me, the surprising thing wasn't that Jam Jam was like thinking Carolyn could win the game. The surprising thing to me was that he thought she could win the game so strongly that he was like, not only can she win the game, but she will win the game. And I have no chance against her. I need her out. Not only, I can't even take the risk that she will win immunity at 5. I need her out at 6. I need to go to the end with Carson. Like, I need to work with Carson to take out Carolyn. And that to me was like way overblown in terms of the actual threat level that we are seeing here, because I think any one of these three could win in a final 3. I think Carson seems to be like the person most likely to win in the final 3 at the moment, and the person that I would be more worried about.
That's so interesting. I disagree. I think Jam Jam is my front runner when I watch it. I think Jam Jam is the front runner.
Well,
I'm
talking about from Jam Jam's perspective. If I'm looking between Carson and Carolyn, I'm most worried about Carson, who has been with me through a lot of the strategic maneuverings that we've been doing, can take a lot of credit for those things, has a lot of really good relationships with Ratu, with Soka, whereas Carolyn has a couple of good relationships socially, but has mostly been seen as outside the strategic structure, and doesn't have as many of those connections. Like, I'm going to be way more concerned about Carson most of the time. I'm definitely worried about Carolyn as well, but not to the point where I'm like, I gotta, I have to dramatically lower my odds of making it to final 3 in order to make sure Carolyn's not sitting next to me. That feels like an overreaction.
Maybe. I also though feel like, for what you're saying, I think that Jam Jam probably, and I don't know if this is true, I would love to hear him answer this, after the season. But if I'm sitting in Jam Jam's position and I'm like, okay, well, this person has a more similar game to me, I am probably less threatened by them than the person who was the outsider, who has overcome stuff, who I just watched do a really big flashy thing, and who I have underestimated this entire time, who just completely overblew my expectations of what she was capable of. Like, I think that would spook me really badly. If I had been underestimating this person the entire time, who I was working closely with, and then they revealed that they are much stronger than I thought that they were even capable of, I would be very threatened by that. Like, I'm thinking about, like, if I am sorry everybody to relate this to Big Brother, but this is just what I do. If I'm in the Big Brother house and I have 2 really close allies, one of them I don't respect as much, one of them I'm in lockstep with, and the one that I don't respect as much wins the double eviction and it does something really big and flashy that I was not expecting them to do, and makes a huge grandiose speech and, like, has an awesome double eviction, I think I would be much more threatened by them because of our differences. Do you know what I mean?
No, yeah, I mean, I agree in general. I think that having some, if you feel like you're sitting next to somebody who you played similarly to, but you've played better than,
Yeah.
that's, I think, what you would prefer to have, because if there's a contrast, all of a sudden, like, your strengths and the things that make you better
Mhm.
become less important because it
Yes.
becomes a dichotomy between two different things. And it's not a comparison between two things where you're better. So I would be concerned about that in general. But again, like for me, if I'm Jam Jam, it's not to the degree that I'd be so concerned, because for me, like the true contrast, if I'm Jam Jam, and it's hard to know because of the edit and everything, but like if I'm Jam Jam, I'm more concerned about somebody like Lauren than I am about Carolyn, because Lauren is not only a contrast to how I played the game, but she's also like very good socially. She's from a different tribe who had different allies and different relationships than me. She's won a couple of these challenges now. Like Lauren to me seems like a huge end game threat that obviously is immune this week, but somebody that I'm significantly more concerned about than somebody like Carolyn. And by taking Carolyn out, it dramatically lowers my odds of being able to take somebody like Lauren out, let alone get myself to the final three. Because if let's say Jam Jam goes through with this plan and takes out Carolyn, we go into the final five, and now Lauren is locked in with Jamie, and maybe Jam Jam is locked in with Carson, and maybe they feel like they have Heidi still, maybe they don't. But either way, like things are a lot more tricky at that point for
Oh.
them to actually make it to the end.
I completely agree with you. He should definitely not have taken Carolyn out here. Like, no
Right.
way, no way should he have done that. I'm just saying, Kendall in the chat said, I agree with both of you somehow. Yes, Kendall, because you're smart and both of us have good takes. Neither of us are wrong. I don't know if you've noticed the entire time, all we've been saying is, I see what you mean, but I disagree.
I
'Cause-
think the thing is that that like I sort of put the cart before the horse, and I started talking about how I felt like it was a wrong move to take out Carolyn, and that the reasoning wasn't even that good to do it. And you were like, the reasoning is actually okay, but it's still the wrong move. I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so that's sort of where things are, and from my perspective, I agree. I think Carolyn, it's tough. Like I have trouble determining how Carolyn will do with this jury, because I think that she has the respect of a player like Franny, who obviously would come with Matt. And not just because Matt would just automatically vote the way Franny would want to vote, but because they're going to be talking and probably discussing and will probably agree with their own the conclusions that they come to. But you also have a lot of people that haven't really played with Carolyn, and people that have like really overlooked her. And so people like, and these are the people I'm most concerned about, people like Brandon and Danny, who went on that summit with her and just completely ignored her, who continued to ignore her, like at least according to the edit, like throughout the rest of the game, are those people who will be willing to be like, you know what? We overlooked her. Oh man. Like sort of like how Marianne was able to be like, hey, you overlooked me, and people like, we did. Or are they going to, because they both have really good relationships with people like Carson, who like I think they really, if they respect Carson's game and they don't feel burned by him, I think will really feel like, man, Carson really made this happen. And, and Carolyn, yeah, she's more impressive than we thought she would be, but look at Carson. Or even I think somebody like Jam Jam, like, well, man, Jam Jam was in the line of fire a lot. Like, we really like Jam Jam. We have a relationship with Jam Jam. We saw what he was doing. I feel like that's the tricky part for Carolyn. And I think that the Carolyn game, which is one where I think you are able to win respect by advocating for yourself and like making big moves, and not as much through like actual social relationships, because it seems like, at least again according to the edit, that's where she struggled, because she just doesn't have those personal connections as much. That can still work, but I think it's a little tricky, especially in a final three where there's multiple other options. We've seen it work in Big Brother before, where it's like, well, one person is like, you had a lot of relationships. You had a relationship with this person, but like they really burned you and you're really mad at them and like all of this stuff. And then there's this other person that you didn't really have a relationship with, and they burned you too, but you feel less bad about that because you didn't have a relationship with them. Like that can work, but when there's two other options, it's like, okay, well, I'm really burned about Carson, but I'm less mad at Jam Jam. So like I'll give it to Jam Jam because I do have a relationship with Jam Jam, but I'm not as mad at Jam Jam or whatever the case may be, right? So
yeah, I don't know. Like this is what is making me excited about the finale is like it can go so many ways and they would all be good choices. Like I am not mad about any of those three winning. Like I think that they all have really strong games for really different reasons. And like that is I think what I came into this podcast talking about. Like that's exciting, right? Is that like there are these permutations and like that whole scenario that you just talked through. Like I could make an argue that like yes, but Carolyn will be seen as, the forever underdog. And if she goes out there and she says, and Brandon and Danny, you guys ignored me and I came back ready to fight, like that put the fire in me to do what I had to do out here. Like they might be very impressed by that because they get the credit for it. Or, Jam Jam apparently has this incredible social game that we've been hearing about in all the exit interviews that we can't, sometimes those great social games don't translate as much on the show just because you don't have time to. It's sort of like the Sarah Lucina of it all, where everybody's completely obsessed with her and you're like, they are like what? And I mean, Jam Jam's like radiance
makes a lot
comes
more
through
sense.
the screen. Yeah, absolutely. But you don't see that people are as in love with him as they seem to be in these exit interviews. So it could be a situation where Jam Jam's sitting next to Carson and Carolyn and it doesn't even matter. Like his game is closely aligned with them enough and people love him so much that they're like, yes, absolutely, we're giving it to him. Like I do really feel like there are so many different, if it ends up being this final three, which I don't think it will be, I think it'll be two of them and Heidi, but that maybe is for a little bit further down in this discussion. But like I think that the thing about survivor juries is that unless you have a situation where like Marianne took Omer out in this giant flashy way right at the last actual vote out, and like she made the final move before fire and all of this, like something like that where it's like, signed, sealed, delivered, that's the winner of the season. Like survivor juries can be very finicky. I don't know.
Yeah, like in terms of like Tika's success, I think I've been focusing a lot on how it seems like we're being told from multiple angles that like Carson is the driving force behind a lot of the strategic success of Tika because he was an honorary Ratu and he was the one who like a lot of these players who left the game, they trusted Carson too much, and that's why they felt comfortable making the moves that they did that ultimately spelled their demise. But I think part of the reason they trust Carson so much is because I think Carolyn does a great job of not seeming like she's with Carson and Jam Jam, which is a more difficult thing to do than you might, I think, imagine, right? Because we heard from Jamie in her exit interview talked about like how she felt like she kind of had like a 4-person thing with Carson and Jam Jam and Lauren. And that obviously excludes Carolyn. It clearly it sort of explains why they felt comfortable going with Tika last week, which I felt like was a mistake, and I think clearly it was. But clearly they felt like, yeah, well, Carson and Jam Jam are not actually with Carolyn, which is kind of I think, silly thing to think for the most part. Like, why wouldn't they be with Carolyn? They've been voting with Carolyn this whole time. And I get it. They argue a lot, but like, just think about like their own incentives, right? And then even beyond that, even if they weren't with Carolyn, what incentive did they have to not bring Carolyn to the end over you or Lauren at that point in the game? But anyway, Carolyn, I think part of the reason why she may even have trouble making these social connections is because she is playing this role of being on the outs, which is something that is like a vital part of it. I mean, think about Big Brother, and think about Big Brother 24 and how, how much Taylor had to sacrifice social connections in order to play a role that benefited the group at large. That was a vital role that was necessary to the success of that group, but was detrimental to her own personal game for the short term. And that's something that clearly Carolyn is capable of doing, because people are not suspecting that she is with them. And she is not like going out of her way to be like, no, I'm in power too. You need to deal with me as well. She's actually just like out there playing her own game. As they're also just like cutting out her options. And she's like,
just like that. Those are great Carolyn sound effects. I mean, yeah, it's like I just, something that really stuck with me during your coverage of BB Can 10 and hearing Kevin speak after the game is like, you pointed it out, and Taylor did this too in BB 24, how hard it is to play from the bottom. Like, playing from the bottom is a really, really difficult thing to do. And so if you are able to play, and I don't know if I should bring this up, but this is sort of that situation as well. Somebody like Gabler, where like you play from the bottom, nobody's really respecting you, you're sort of just like there, and then slowly but surely you're able to maneuver your way up, and then that sometimes leads to people, depending on the way that you can frame it at the end, it leads to people either not respecting you at all and being like, yeah, how did they even end up here? Or people being like, oh my gosh, they were able to do this all from the bottom. Like, why didn't we take them out when we had the chance? This is insanity. And I feel like Carolyn's story is very in line with that. And honestly, Jam Jam's story is a little bit in line with that too. Like, Jam Jam during those merge weeks, like it was really dicey for him. Every single tribal council, he, by his own admission, he was like pooping his pants. He was so nervous because it was like a razor's edge of if it's going to be Jam Jam or not, because every single week they'd throw his name out. And I guess I wonder with you, is it more like Jam Jam was playing from the bottom because he was actively being targeted because they thought that he was good enough to target, or was Carolyn really playing from the bottom because she wasn't even being targeted because people like Danny and Brandon like ignored her?
Well, I'm trying to think about like the votes that Jam Jam was in trouble during, right? And like it was the first fake merge vote, right? Where there were only a certain amount of people vulnerable, and it was going to be Kane, but then Kane managed to intercede, and it changed to Jam Jam. But that was kind of a weird situation because there were a lot of people that were immune and all that. And then again, he was on the wrong side of like a like half the cast is immune. And he was just at the bottom of a RHAP majority there, and was one of the two options. And then from that point, he I don't think he got votes after that, right? Once they got together proper.
There was one tribal that he got a couple votes, I thought, after that, but maybe I'm wrong. The chat would know better.
Yes. And Drinks in the chat correctly points out as well, and I forgot about this, that that Carson had sort of made it seem like Jam Jam was the leader of Tika, and had sort of painted a target on Jam Jam's back in that way. And I think, again, also like at that point helped separate the Tikas in general. And so made it seem like Jam Jam was an appealing target that was worthy of being targeted while also being vulnerable at that point. And so I think that's probably why he pops up as a backup sort of option a few times. But then once Tika really starts to get into control, no longer the case. And at that point, Jam Jam is in a position to actually have power and wield it. Whereas Carolyn, I think, still not being seen as in the power, is seen as a soul vote, and is seen as like, maybe you want to like entice her to your side, but isn't seen as like, well, I need to have Carolyn or else,
Yeah.
which they probably felt like with Carson and Jam Jam. But it's hard to say again with all the edit stuff, a typical disclaimer. Yeah.
Do you think that Carson's age also is going to be a detriment? I know we just saw Marianne win, but it felt different. You know?
It's tough because I think that, I mean, usually what we would see um with a player as young as Carson is that either people just like don't respect them at all in their game, which doesn't seem to be the case for Carson, or they feel like extra burned by them because they were like, I took you in, like I gave you shelter, like, and you betray me like this.
Yeah.
And
like the mom archetype, but a child
mom
archetype.
or older sibling, like whatever the case may be. It doesn't seem like that's happening either. I mean, he's burned a bunch of people and nobody seems to be like actually mad at him about it. So I don't think those
Okay.
two things are causing too much of an issue at this point. I think also from what we've seen now, less on Survivor, more on Big Brother. We've seen the Carson archetype on Big Brother win multiple times. It tends to work very well on Big Brother. That whether you burn people or not, whether people are mad at you or not, you get to the end and you're earnest and you're like, I did it, guys. Like, look at me. Like, and they're like, oh, look at you. I'll give it to you. And so, but on Survivor, I think a little bit less so. Maybe it's because of the setting.
3.
Like,
I think when there's 3 people, it is very different than like the earnest young person who's just, I did it, guys, versus, the person sitting next to them. When it's like a choice between, it's different. And also, I think that unfortunately for Carson, hit the earnest young guy being like, I did it, guys, next to Carolyn, who's like, I am one of one. And Jam Jam, who is the most charming person that we've had on Survivor in years. Like, I think that it maybe dilutes it a little bit just because of the Tika's likability factor in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that I think strategically Carson has the most amount of things he can hang his hat on. I think in terms of individual relationships, he seems to have the most and the best. But the rest, and I think he could make a good case for himself, but I think Carolyn and Jam Jam will both make like more appealing cases. And they both have other things. Like Jam Jam, I think, is just like so likable, so just like a force of like Jam Jam in a final 3 tribal is gonna be tough. Like, he's going to be funny, he's gonna be likable, and he's also gonna be sharp. Like, he's gonna be on you, and it's gonna be tough to it's tough to battle against somebody like Jam Jam in a situation like that because he is very good at throwing barbs while still being like, we're just having fun. And if you respond to it in any way that is not having fun, then you are the downer, and you are being defensive.
Is that also the sort of, we've talked about this a little bit in Big Brother, like people who English is not their first language, like there's a bit of like a tone, like a lighter tone that people will take, I think, with people who maybe, I guess we just saw on BB24 that was not the case with, oh my God, what's her name? I want to say Ivy, but I don't think that's her name. What was her name? Brazilian.
I know you're talking about.
Oh my God, Indy.
Indy, thank you.
But like I remember that was a big thing with JC on some of the Canada seasons, like the people who are like French dual language. Yeah, the chat is yelling at me, Indy. Um, I feel like that also adds to sort of the like what you're talking about, like the oh, we're having fun here. Like it's a joke. It's a joke. Even though like what he's saying is very cutting, he can be like, what? It's a joke. And there's not really anything to argue with there. Do you know what I mean?
You write my name down, you're dead.
And I think that like watching him this week, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to tell all my friends that are obsessed with Carolyn that I think I might be rooting for Jam Jam next episode to win. Like, because he was really winning me over. He's just he's also one of one. He's so fun. And you're right that I would be if I was out there with him, I would be like, I can take Carson in a final 3. I can take Carolyn in a final 3, but I cannot take Jam Jam. Like he's got to go.
Yeah. And then I think Carolyn will have the passion that like typically, you know, again, like the earnestness of Carson, who's like, hey, like this has been my dream, you know, like look at me here. I think like Carolyn kind of steals a lot of that.
Uh-huh.
Because she's also like, you know, a huge fan of the show, and will have so much passion and so much fight in her. That's a little more hit or miss. I feel like it can either really hit or just not land if they're not with her. But definitely something that I would be worried about heading into a final 3. I would love to see the 3 of them at Final Tribal. I think that would be the best way to end the season. But you know, I've seen all of the Carson fire theories. So who knows? But
don't tell me that you're on like that you are buying in
that Carson will make fire
because of the fire theories.
I mean, once it was pointed out to me, it's literally like every episode they like CGI in fire into his glasses. Speaking of which, what was that fly? Did you notice the fly?
Yes.
In front of like
Lauren.
What like intern on Survivor was like hey, I took a special effects class and I'm really excited to like throw in some effects here.
Yeah. I don't know about that. Whatever. Fun, I guess.
Anyway.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, that's where we are. I think that ultimately my perspective on what happens in this episode, Jam Jam wants to take out Carolyn, which I think is just not the move. I don't think taking Carolyn out here makes a lot of sense. I think based on what we saw that it appears that Jam Jam was actually serious enough about it. He went to Carson pitching the plan, and Carson, who we saw say at the beginning of the episode, says, I want to keep Tika together. I think Carson said no. I think Carson said that doesn't make sense. You know, maybe he said we can take her out at 5 if we need to, or maybe he talked Jam Jam down entirely. But it seems as though Carson kind of put that plan to rest. And then from that point, they followed through with faking that they were going to go through with it in order to prevent Jamie and Lauren from seeing what was about to come. And then to the point where they faked it in Tribal as well. And then they voted Jamie out along with Heidi, who I have plenty to say about once we talk about Stockwatch scores. So so did that seem right to you? Because it seemed to me like Carson probably is the one that shot this down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he probably shot it down, and Jam Jam was like, "You're right." You know, like I don't think that it was like a battle. You know, I think that it was, and I also can see Jam Jam. I can see not now. I'm really putting on my Survivor conspiracy theorist hat. Like I can see some of these confessionals from Jam Jam talking about how he wants to vote out Carolyn Final 5, or from before. Like I don't know. I can see because there were a lot of Jam Jam confessionals about Carolyn. Like there were like 4 or 5. There were a lot. But I don't imagine that it really had legs.
That was my thought at the beginning of this episode, and in the episode preview, I was like, like Jam Jam's gonna actually vote out Carolyn. It makes no sense. And then it comes up in the episode, and I'm like, I mean, that was a little more like I expected it to be like in the moment. I was like, that was a little more premeditated than I thought it would be, but like he's probably just considering his options, and he kept talking about it and kept talking about it and planned on it with Jamie and Lauren, and then kept talking about it, and then like cried in the confessional about it, like, oh, it just sucks. I don't want to do it. I'm like, you're not actually doing this, Jam Jam. There's no way. And then he pitches it to Carson. I'm like, oh my God, like he's doing this. And then of course it doesn't happen. Which is why, again, I felt like it was probably Carson's reluctance that stopped it. But it makes me wonder, like, if Carson is on board, or like if he decides. I guess he probably feels like he can't do it without Carson, because that would make it even worse.
Yeah.
But
point then?
it did seem to me like if Carson had been on board, that like this would have happened. And then, you know, who knows where things go from there.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about the Stockwatch with you, because I feel like we've talked the episode to death.
Yes. All right. Well, here are the players left. It's Tika on top. And then there's one remaining Soka and one remaining Ratu, as Jamie has been voted out, down at the bottom. So let's start with Jamie, who finally got binged out of the game. And I gotta say, like, I actually felt like Jamie performed pretty well in this episode. I think that she was speaking to what people needed to hear, talking to Carolyn about how Carson was a major threat and that Carson needed to go. Carolyn heard that. She was like, I know he needs to go. I know I can't beat Carson, but not yet. So like, she clearly made a dent in Carolyn. It just wasn't quite enough. And then with Jam Jam as well, like, she pivots. She goes from Carson is clearly the biggest threat to Jam Jam goes to her and says, I think Carolyn's the biggest threat. And she doesn't go, no, I think Carson's the biggest threat. She goes, oh, Jam Jam, you're right. Carolyn is a big threat. We need to take out Carolyn if anyone wants a chance at winning the game. And just rides with that. And speaks on that at Tribal, and speaks on that like at every opportunity. And I have to imagine that Jamie is a huge part of why Jam Jam like fell into this hole, because she's really reinforcing a lot of those ideas that he's sort of like giving to her. So I was actually kind of impressed with all of that. And you know, seemingly having Jam Jam on board, if not for Jam Jam needing Carson to stay on board as well. You know, maybe could have gotten this through. And if she had, I mean, that would have been a huge coup, and changed the entire game, I think. That said, you know, I don't know that she was ever like on a trajectory to win necessarily. Like, what is a final 3 that looks like she can win? Like, is it Heidi and Lauren? Is it Heidi and, you know, Tika? Because I feel like Lauren and or Tika all have great shots to beat Jamie. And, you know, at the end of the day, that was sort of like the major issue here. But with all that said as well, it wasn't even really supposed to be Jamie. It was supposed to be Lauren.
Yep.
Lauren happened to win immunity. So a lot to sort of not blame Jamie on for her boot episode here.
Yeah, I was going to say Jamie is a victim of circumstance in the way that she just had to have won that immunity. Like, if anybody other than Lauren had won the immunity, it wouldn't have been her. But yeah, it was her time. And the thing that is unfortunate is that, oh, excuse me. The thing that is unfortunate is that I do feel like Jamie, if she had survived this vote, would have been like, she would have had a spot in the final 3. Maybe not an automatic spot, but she absolutely could have been a kingmaker or queenmaker, you know? But it just didn't, the chips didn't fall that way. But I don't think that she had any shot of winning. at all.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. And I think maybe a little bit of carryover here, even though I think she performed pretty well in this episode. I think part of the only reason, not the only reason, because it would have gone through regardless, but like she did make a choice to be in this spot last week when she voted with Tika. Whether the idol would have made that play happen or not, like she made the choice to go along with it. So not great there. But overall, not a lot of complaints about Jamie's performance in this particular episode. I think I'd give her like a 4.
Yeah, I was gonna actually say 5, just like replacement level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. Okay. Next, we have to talk about Heidi because I'm putting
You
Heidi
first.
next. This oh geez, this is a little messy. There we go. Last week, I kind of talked about Heidi's options, right? And I was like, okay, Heidi theoretically has 2 options. She can she has an idol. So if she wants to, she can use the idol to side with Jamie and Lauren and try to take out Tika, take control of the game, go to the end with Jamie and Lauren, or try to, and potentially win. I mean, Lauren, I think, would have a great shot, but Heidi making a huge play with the idol to take out Tika would, I think, immediately put her in front runner territory. And that would be a like take the game by its reins kind of moment, win the game potential kind of moment. But there are some risks attached. One, it could fail. You could play the idol on the wrong person. Could go down to rocks, whatever the case may be. You could be betrayed by Lauren and Jamie. And then you're without an idol at final 5. Whereas, holding on to your idol, you get to keep your idol. You play the idol at 5, you're guaranteed fire making. Great chance to get to the final 3 if you are able to hold on to your idol at 5. So there are risks attached, but that's the move I would want to make if I were playing the game, because I would want to, take the game and try to like actually make myself a path to win.
It's the Marianne move.
Yeah, like make a mark on the game, like make a play. The other option, if you're not so bold, you want to play a little more conservatively. Maybe you feel like you have a decent chance to win in a final 3, even against a Tika, even against some other people. You just want to get there. What's the safer play? Well, you can side with Tika. It's the safe play. It's the boring play. It might lose you some respect on the jury because it's so safe and boring. But you get to hold on to your idol. You're guaranteed final 5 immunity, guaranteed fire making at 4. If not immunity at 4. You get to the final 3. You have a great shot at all of that. It's the safer play, less likely to win the game overall, I would think. But it's one that I could respect. Heidi decided to take neither one of those paths.
She took the secret third option.
She went right down the middle and sided with Tika, the safe play, while also playing the idol unnecessarily. So now she does not have an idol at 5 and also sided with Tika and has no agency left in the game to do anything. And she's now locked into being into a final 3 with one of the Tika players without an idol. I couldn't think of a worse way for her to play this round.
Womp womp. Yeah. I've seen some theories floating around online that she got the idol, Carolyn's,
Yes.
re-hidden idol, and she will have back-to-back idols. And like for sure, but I do think that Steven put it best on the know-it-alls when he was like, did you listen to the know-it-alls?
I did not.
He goes, yeah, that Heidi played her idol in the saddest "I'm also here" that we've seen in a while.
Well, that was the thing, because I was watching live on Twitch and I was ranting about this play once I realized what happened. And there were people in the chat, they're like, wow, wait, Taran, what if she found that idol? What if they're hiding it from us and that she had 2 idols? And I was like, That's even worse.
Yeah.
That's
Then you
even
play
worse.
it for yourself
If
and
she-
Jamie there.
Yeah, if you had 2 idols, you have even more ammunition to play them offensively. You could have, for free, played this idol to try to take out a Tika.
Mhm.
You didn't need to do any of the safe stuff at all and still had the idol at 5.
Oh, you're right. I didn't even think of that. Oh, God. Oh, that makes it so much worse. You're right. Not until you said that was I like, oh, the Parvati double idol play. Oh, no. Oh, God. It's because I'm not watching with, I watch usually with my roommate and he was gone this week. So I watched this episode by myself and usually we talk through all types of things like that. But yeah, that's it's a rough.
Yeah,
one.
I mean, like we focused a lot on Jam Jam in this episode about like, will he turn on Carolyn? Will he not turn on Carolyn? Taking for granted the fact that Heidi was just voting with Tika. Like, because that to me was like the true crux of the episode was like, if Heidi votes
Karen,
with
stop,
Jamie
stop.
and Lauren, it's an entirely different
Karen.
episode.
No, you gotta stop. You gotta stop that. That's enough now. Wow, you're right. Okay, so what are you gonna rate her?
I mean, I feel bad because it's because the episode didn't even focus on. I feel like that's been the case with Heidi for so long, is that like I feel like she's making moves that make no sense to me, but also she's not getting much spotlight. So like, um, so it feels like it feels like I'm picking on her. Like she's
It
like,
does feel a little like you're picking on her right
I
now.
feel bad. Especially because she's not getting the spotlight, we're not really getting a lot of her reasoning either. We do get a little bit of it in this episode, talking about how going with Tika is the safer play. But if you're going with the safer play, why are you also playing your idol? But man, yeah, this episode was that was not good. I feel like she went from in this episode alone, there were a wide variety of outcomes that could have happened, especially because she actually knew who they were voting for and thus could have successfully played the idol easily. She could have played the idol, taken out a Tika, any Tika she wanted, taken control of the game, potentially become a front runner to win, and instead lost the idol, sided with Tika, guaranteeing a Tika in the final 3, and probably can't win the game at this point. Like, those are that's a wide spectrum, and so I feel like I have to do it. I think I have to give her a 1.
Oh my gosh. Heidi just got eviscerated by Taran on the Stockwatch.
I'm sorry, Heidi. I actually really like Heidi. I think she's like I think that's part of why I'm like so surprised when she makes moves I think aren't great, is because I'm like I feel like she's thinking about the game a lot and I like her, and I'm like all right, Heidi, wait, what?
Yeah, okay, so I'm not gonna do that.
Mm.
I think that if we had found out that she had 2 idols this episode, I would have agreed with you because womp womp. But I am going to give her a 2 instead because I do think that and I don't like to say this because I thought in my head I was on a feedback show or maybe I was on the Stockwatch with you last season. And I almost said, and I didn't want to get yelled at online. This is the reason that I said it because I didn't do it because I was like, people are going to be in the comments like, Maggie, stop, ridiculous. But I almost said, I bet you if Gabler does a really good final tribal performance, he could still win. I do think with this move this week, I don't even think Heidi's got that going on. I think that she's cemented herself to be the third with 2 Tikas in the final 3. The
Yeah.
whatever Tika decides to strike at the other first. I think that it's either going to be Heidi, Carolyn, and Jam Jam, or Heidi, Carson, and Carolyn.
I mean, that's like if she doesn't get sniped at 5 and she like maybe wins fire. Like there's still like a hard path to even get to the final 3 for me.
Yeah, I think what I see happening. Okay, ready? Prediction time, everybody. My predictions for the finale are that Lauren will go at 5, and then Heidi will win immunity at Final 4 and
Okay.
pick who goes in fire. And it'll probably be Carson and Carolyn in fire because her and Jam Jam are very close. And then
Okay.
Carson loses fire because of the CGI fire in his glasses. Boom, big brain.
I mean, that's entirely possible. I do think Lauren is going to be the de facto target heading into 5. It's just if Lauren wins immunity at 5, I think Heidi's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Speaking of, let's talk about Lauren. Lauren loses Jamie here. Not great. Would have been huge. Lauren. Like there are different ways where different people could have become the front runner of the game in this episode. Heidi, taking control using her idol, whatever that could have been, would have put Heidi in front. I think this plan by Jam Jam to take out Carolyn would have made Lauren the front runner.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for her that it didn't go through. Granted, I don't know how much work she put in to make it happen. From the episode, I think we saw a lot of Jam Jam, we saw a lot of Jamie, and we saw Lauren being approached with the plan, being like, sure. So I don't know if I can I'm sure she was involved because they usually are. But from what we saw, she wasn't. So I don't know how much I can credit her for what almost happened, and the fact that it didn't happen at all means that there's not a lot there to begin with. But she does win immunity, which puts her firmly into the final 5, having won the most immunities, of the remaining players, and is now the final Ratu as well, remaining Ratu in the game. And Ratu was pretty close. Like Ratu had a pretty good bond. They never turned on each other like Soka did. And that to me means that Lauren, like in real time, has a great chance to win this game. Granted, can't take anything for granted with edits, but she has been so absent from the season that it feels hard to believe that she actually could win the game. But I feel like I've said that multiple times in the new era, and then it happens anyway. But I do think she should have a great chance to win this game. All it would probably take is either one, Jam Jam betraying Carolyn at 5 moment, or winning immunity at 5, and then maybe winning fire or whatever the case may be there. And so not a lot of like stuff that she did in this episode beyond winning immunity that I can point to be like, great job, Lauren. But I do think she has a decent chance of getting to the end, a decent chance of winning if she is in the end. But you kind of have to like divide those by each other because, when compared to Tika, who's like guaranteed one of them is there and guaranteed one of them probably has the best chance of winning, it's still not that great. So I think for Lauren, I'm gonna go with a 5 for Lauren.
Really? Okay. So Lauren is a great Survivor player. Like straight up, we've seen very little of her, but I can tell that she's a great Survivor player. She really understands the game. She's great socially. People really like her. She's very calm under pressure. I think she's a good, like she's somebody that people are drawn to, like they want to try to work with her in whatever way. I think that she just, like, you plop her in most Survivor seasons and she's going to be in this position. Like she's going to be maybe in a better position than she is right now, but she's going to be in the final 6, if that makes sense. Like I think that she is one of those types of players who just like get social dynamics, is easy to get along with, is usually going to be on the right side of most of the votes. I think that if she wins immunity at 5, Or yeah, you're right. Like it's a jam turning on Carolyn at 5, then she wins immunity or fire. Like if she's in the final 3 against like Carolyn and Carson, I think she has a better I think Jam is her biggest obstacle if she's in the final 3. I do think that you're right. And when you say that like Tika just in general has a stronger chance in the finals than she does, but I do think that she really does have a fighting chance. Like I could see this being a great final episode for her and her coming out and being the winner and me feeling pretty satisfied after the first 50 minutes of this podcast was so excited about the prospect of which Tika was going to win. Because I do think that she has shown that she has real survivor chops this season, you know? So I'm going to give her a 6 because I gave Jamie a 5. I just think that she's just going to be so heavily targeted that it's going to be tough for her. And I mean, she's no slouch in challenges. She's won 2 immunities, but like when she won the first one, she was like, I never in a bajillion years thought I would win an immunity. And when she won this past one, she was really surprised as well. So I don't think like her winning immunity is like guaranteed, you know? But yeah, and also the edit is just hard as a viewer. I mean, Erica was like so purpled, but I don't know. I do just have to say Lauren is so beautiful. Like she said something at the sanctuary when like about being a single mom getting her feet rubbed and I was like you look like you're 21. Like her skin is perfect and she's been on Survivor for however many days. Like she is so but I'm like if this is what you look like being out in the wilderness for 20 something days. So I just had to say that because her skin is unbelievable. But yeah, that's my feelings on Lauren.
All right. Well, that means we can go into Tika. And we might disagree on this. For me, I'm gonna have Jam at the bottom of Tika.
What? We do.
Because I feel like this plan to take out Carolyn was wild. And should never have gotten as far as it did. The fact that he was that serious about making a move that I feel like is not a good move is like the most criticism I can put to any Tika member almost in the entire game at this point. I mean, I just feel like that was probably the worst thing we've seen from Tika certainly in the post-merge of the game so far. It didn't go through, so it's not like I'm tanking his rating by any means. But I do think it was a bit of a mistake there. But his position is still very good. So I mean, I think that he is in a spot where he should be getting to 4. Fire making makes everything weird. People could want you in the final 3, but you still have to make fire, and then you lose, and then all of a sudden you've lost. So that could certainly happen to Jam. But he should be making it to at least 4. I don't see any world where he gets voted out at 5, given that Carson and Carolyn are the 2 names that have been thrown out as threats, and Lauren is still there as a threat for Tika to vote out. There's just a lot of other names. He should be safe at 5. And then once he's in the final 3, I think he's a great chance to win. But I am going to penalize him for this attempted shot at Carolyn, even though it didn't go through, just to differentiate him from the other Tikas who I think also have great chances to ultimately win the game. So I'm gonna go with a 6 for Jam.
What?
I gave him a 6 last week too.
Oh my gosh. I think Jam is the front runner moving into the finale. I think that he is the one to beat.
He certainly could be. It's position is not everything with the Stockwatch. I think he is at the very least tied with Carson and Carolyn as front runner status in terms of the game. If not maybe edging them out a little bit. But I am subtracting points for his performance in this episode.
Yeah. Maybe, but I also don't like we had the whole discussion about it that I do think that he's right to have an eye on Carolyn. Um I I want to give Jam Jam like don't be mad at me. Nobody be mad at me. You included, Taran. I want to give Jam Jam like an 8.
I don't think anybody's gonna be mad at you. I
Yeah,
think people are gonna be more likely to be mad at me than mad at you.
yeah, like an 8 or I mean, yeah, if I'm trying to go like crazy, I
Right
might
with your heart, Maggie.
I'm gonna give Jam Jam a 9. Not because you're right. I do think that the Carolyn plan was like, whoa, but I don't think that he was ever gonna do it. And I also want to be able to do descending order. And I want to be able to give the lowest Tika 7 still. So I'm gonna give him a 9. I think he's the front runner of the Tikas for me. Like you said, I think in Final Tribal, he is deadly. I also think that he has Heidi in a way that people don't quite see. Um, like Jamie in her exit interview was talking about how like I think that people didn't see how close Jam Jam and I were. And I would probably guess that Lauren and Jam Jam have a pretty close relationship too. Like I could see him going into final four with and not having to make fire. Like if Lauren or Heidi win that immunity, they would take Jam Jam with them. And I
Is there, because just to clarify this, in Jamie's ex interview with Rob, she talked about this or not necessarily final four, but like a
uh-huh.
four-person thing that Lauren, Jam Jam, and Carson had. She said she was closer to Jam Jam and Lauren was closer to Carson. And so that's again, I think what explains their move in the previous episode to
Mhm.
not target Carson, and instead go with Tika to target Danny. But the Jam Jam and Heidi connection, have I forgotten a scene there? What was
Yeah, it was
the
during the vote the split at the merge when Heidi was like, "Yeah, I'm going to act like I'm saving Matt, but I really like Jam Jam. I think Jam Jam and I
Mhm.
can work together." And they've always had a sort of working relationship since then. You know, we haven't gotten a confessional really since then of her being like, "I love him and we're besties." But the relationship very clearly has continued on. She's voting with him, you know. He didn't want to go. He and Carson didn't go with the plan to vote her out on that Franny vote. Um yeah, I just feel like I see him sitting in the final 3 the most out of all of them.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I also think that he has the story that Rob talked about last night of like you write Jam Jam's name down, you're gone. And like that is pretty exciting at a final tribal council. If for him to say you wrote my name down, you and then you were gone. You wrote my like that's a pretty great. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that there's like a way to read what's happening here. If Jam Jam has a closer relationship to Heidi than like Carson does, where like, I think Carson was probably closer to Lauren, closer to Danny, closer to Brandon, closer to a lot of the people that are now gone.
Mhm.
Carolyn obviously closer to Franny. If Jam Jam is able to get to the end, obviously he intended to target Lauren here, which would have been even better for Jam Jam. If Lauren leaves and he's closer to Jamie and closer to Heidi, then like I think that could be the story, and this is the sort of thing, like, either they're not showing it or it just wasn't intentional, but, like, definitely puts Jam Jam into a more solid position, even if he wasn't, and maybe is why he's not being targeted here. When we talked about, like, at the beginning of this episode when, they started talking about Carson as a bigger threat instead of Jam Jam, maybe it's because Danny was closer to Carson, than Jam Jam, and Danny was pushing this Jam Jam narrative. We got to get Jam Jam out, but once Danny leaves, uh, Jam Jam has more people that are close to him, and so the narrative switches to Carson. So, you know, I think I think that could be sort of how uh, we see. Yeah. So if Heidi wins, yeah, I mean, I could see Heidi. would Heidi choose Carolyn to make fire? I guess with this new
Yeah.
narrative that Carolyn's a threat to win, yeah, I could see her choosing
Carolyn
to
against
take
Carson and fire. I think that's what she would do in the
Jam
hopes
Jam.
that Carolyn can beat someone in fire, because they have all been saying that Carolyn is really good at fire.
I think Lauren probably wouldn't, though. I think Lauren would, if Lauren is closer to Carson, she could either take Carson or recognize that he's a big threat and maybe bring
Mhm.
Carolyn, because she, again, didn't seem super convinced about this Carolyn narrative. But yeah.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts on Jam Jam. He's my one to watch. He's my guy going into the finale, everybody.
I don't think you're wrong. I would honestly, like, in terms of win equity, I think they all have good cases to make. I think Carson, if he gets to the end, has the best chance to win. I do still think that. I think the individual relationships that he has seem to be more numerous. But I think Jam Jam is more likely to get there, and would have a very good chance of still beating Carson. I think he could. There are lots of worlds where Jam Jam beats Carson in a final three, and then I think Carolyn probably lags into the third most likely, but also still totally possible to win. So I mean, I think ultimately, if I had to make a call, I would choose Jam Jam, because I think getting there is the harder part and the easier to predict part than the who wins in the end. Like, I feel more confident about Jam Jam getting to the end than I do about any jury predictions. So I would agree. I think Jam Jam's probably the pick. But I'm still giving it 6 for this episode.
All right.
Okay, so next up for me would be Carolyn, who I think this was actually a good episode for Carolyn in a couple different ways. One is that she is recognizing that cutting Carson is a good thing for her, which I think is true. I think in an ideal world, Carolyn could have cut both Carson and Jam Jam, but you can only do so much. But I think that Jam Jam coming in with this narrative about Carolyn being an endgame jury threat only furthers the narrative. I think that, like, it could have been true, it could have not been true, but the fact that Jam Jam believed it and sold this to Jamie, who's now heading to the jury and will probably be like, what did Jam Jam do? Like, Carolyn is obviously the threat. We all agreed he made the safe play. Like, he's not making a move for himself. Like, that only bolsters Carolyn. And so I think that Carolyn is potentially starting to actually gain some traction here, heading into the finals, where she could actually take some jury votes. The only issue is if Jam Jam still wants her gone. Being targeted by Jam Jam, I think, helps her get jury votes, but it does not help her get to the end if Jam Jam still wants her out. So I don't know where Jam Jam still stands with all of it. If he plans to continue to target her at 5, which just doesn't make sense to me at all, especially if Lauren is still there and available, then that's really dangerous. If Lauren wins another immunity at 5, I think that could really be the moment where Jam Jam says, okay, now we definitely need to take out Carolyn. And that would be very deadly for her, because I don't see how she survives it if Jam Jam doesn't even need Carson at that point. He can just say, hey, Lauren, Heidi, let's take out Carolyn, and then we'll take out Carson. We'll go to the 3 together. And then he can take out, like, between Carson and Lauren, whichever one of them comes along, like, they're both going to be harder to beat than he would like, but there's not a lot of options left here. So I think that there's some worry about her actually getting to the end. And then once she does get there, I do still feel like she has an uphill battle against either Carson or Jam Jam. I think she absolutely can still win, and I think she did very well in this episode, and I think things were looking positive for her. But I do feel worried about her overall, within the context of she's a front runner. So I'm going to give Carolyn a 7.
I am giving Carolyn an 8. I disagree that she will have an uphill battle in tribal council. I think that that's the other member of Tika that we haven't spoken about yet. I think that Carolyn's story is really great. I think that for all the reasons that we've talked about over and over and over again on the rest of this podcast, I feel like a broken record at this point. But I think that Carolyn has a great shot at winning. And I think that if she is as good at fire as everybody has been talking about, I think that that could be a real, a huge moment if her and Carson with the fire in his glasses make fire against one another and she beats him and she's sobbing because she thinks of him like her son and he leaves and she had to beat him even though she really didn't want to and she wishes she could have been at the end with him, and then of course Carson's going to give his vote to her and people who were rooting for Carson will want, like I just can see the momentum building for her. And I think that she also is incredibly charming. And I think that in a final tribal situation, she will be making them all laugh. And I think that she can articulate her game. We've seen her in these confessionals able to articulate her game in a very specific way. And I think that the one thing that Carolyn really has that somebody like Carson and even a Jam Jam doesn't is that she owns everything. She owns who she is. She owns that, yeah, she's literally this tribal council. She was like, yeah, I am emotional and I'm strategic. So what? Like, I think that players in a final tribal will really respect that. And I think that that is going to be her greatest asset. That's something that I wonder if Carson, because he has loved the show for so long, because he's been playing in this very specific way, because he has a very specific idea of himself, might come into a tribal and try to combat some of the viewpoints that people have of him and say, no, I wasn't actually like that. Like I'm more like this. Like this is why I was doing that. And people don't like to be told how they should think about you in a final tribal. People like to be told that the way that they think about you is correct. And so yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah. Okay, then let's talk about Carson then. So Carolyn gets a 7. I'm actually having to do math here on the Survivor Stockwatch. Jam Jam with a 6 and a 9. Carolyn with they tied.
Oh my gosh. We really have no idea who's gonna win.
All right, let's talk about Carson. Carson has been the top of the Stockwatch for the last few weeks. For me, that's going to remain the same. I think that again, this was just a very good episode for Carson. The fact that his name finally gets brought up as a potential target and then immediately gets nixed. The fact that Jam Jam feels more comfortable going to the final 3 with Carson than Carolyn is huge for Carson. And it doesn't seem like anybody's targeting him now moving into the final 5. I could see a world where like maybe
Carolyn is.
At final 5, I could see. Okay, I could see Carolyn maybe targeting Carson at 5, but with Lauren there, I don't know. I could see a world where, but then does she have the numbers? If Jam Jam, I think Carolyn would have to be immune, because if Jam Jam is anti-Carolyn, Carolyn could make a move on Carson, but then that only seals her fate with Carson, and then Jam Jam, Carson, Heidi probably vote her out, unless she's immune, in which case she could be immune from that. But then like maybe her and Lauren, but then Carson, Jam Jam, Heidi. If Carson, Jam Jam, Heidi are just locked in, but Heidi was concerned about Carson. But she was also, I guess she wasn't in on the plan to take out Carolyn. I guess I still don't know how close Heidi and Jam Jam actually are, because it didn't seem like Jam Jam shared the plan to take out Carolyn with Heidi. So I don't know where Heidi stands on the... Sorry, what?
I was just going to say the Survivor Stockwatch is so fun because we get to see the robot process in real time every single permutation of a very specific amount. Like I feel like I just watched like you put together a puzzle 8 different ways.
Well, the problem is with that though, is that I feel like with Survivor, the pieces are all made up.
Yes. Yes. Hard agree.
They're all just imaginary pieces that I'm trying to put together. And then also people have like very strong opinions about like what's an actual piece and what's not a piece when like nobody knows.
Yeah.
But so I mean, at the end of the day, I feel most comfortable with Jam Jam being safe next week. I think Carson would be the next most safe, but not as safe as Jam Jam. Then I would have Carolyn, then Heidi, then Lauren. Probably maybe switch Carolyn and Heidi depending on what Jam Jam's actually thinking. But I still just don't know that Jam Jam would actually make the move on Carolyn without Carson's approval, and I don't know that Carson would give it. You know, Carson did tell Jam Jam in this episode,
"You've always been my number one."
Yeah,
you know,
always been my number one.
Taran, am I your number one?
What is a number one? Is it like
I don't know. You tell me. Am I it for
a
you?
number one? Well, it's hard to know without knowing what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like Melissa's your number one.
Number one. Well, I feel like the context here is that it's like, okay, well, you're my number one, but what makes it a number one? Does that just mean it's
The
extra
name.
number one?
The name is not one. The name is number one. So you are my number one.
So would that mean that if I had a number two, would that person be my number two? Or would it be?
Taran, can I say it is almost 11 o'clock here on the East Coast, and I can feel it in this convo.
It made me curious. I was like, what is
"You've always been my number one."
Yeah,
you know,
number one? Because it almost feels like it makes sense in my mind. When he says it, I'm like, yeah, number one. He's like the number one. But then I think he didn't say number one. He said number one.
He meant to.
But number one implies that there's multiple number ones and that there's one number one that's on top of the other number ones. That's more number one than the other number ones.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the move now? You know, we've talked to death about the, you know, 1,000 million %. You know, I'm like 115 million % on board. Like, how high do you need to go with the percent? Do you now need to go, you're my number one of all the number ones? If I'm just your number one, then am I really anything to you at that point?
Yeah, you're playing me like a fool, you know?
All right. Anyway.
Where did we go? Where did we like? I think that I might have taken us away from the Carson combo, and I apologize for that.
That was definitely me. I forgot that I had one more soundbite to play. So anyway, I think Carson is doing okay through Final Five. I'm going to ignore the fire making in his glasses and think about how I would think if I was not thinking that perhaps there was some sort of edit pointing in a certain direction, and say that Carson's puzzle ability plus his practicing ability should mean that he has a great chance of winning Final Four immunity, and if not, still a great chance of winning fire. I have to imagine that Carson has practiced fire many times. But I also imagine that, I mean, that's the one thing that everybody must have practiced, because it's the one thing that like everybody needs to practice more than anything else. So I think he still has a great chance of getting to 4. And even if he does get there, even with the fire making motif, it doesn't mean that he loses fire. He could still win fire, and that wins him the game, right? So I think Carson is still absolutely in there with a chance to win. I think that, again, I think he has a great sort of case to sell the jury on. I think that he has a lot of great individual relationships. He doesn't seem to have burned people as badly as he should have, considering how much they seemed to have trusted him. I think the biggest hurdle will be beating Jam Jam in a final 3 final tribal. I think getting there is going to be easier than that, but I do think he still has the best odds of winning if he does get there. And I think this episode again just proved just how good he is, evading the target. Jam Jam wants to go to the end with him. He seemingly talks Jam Jam out of this plan to go against Carolyn, and he's still set up in a really good spot to potentially win this game. I'm going to give him an 8.
Yeah, I'm giving Carson a 7. It's my 987 here for the Tika 3.
987, and I went 678.
Yeah.
I think they all tied.
Well, as it should be going into this finale.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that Carson, I listened to your Stockwatch with Peridium, and I'm so glad that you two were completely on the same page about your feelings about Carson. Like, I'm very happy for the two of you. I am not on that page. I think that he might be a little bit overestimated in my opinion. I think that Carson is good at what he's doing. But I think that he is in it too closely with the other Tikas. And when you have a game that is as tightly aligned with two other people, what starts to inch out is social game. Like, if strategically we are all pretty much on the same page, I need to know, like, socially, or people are going to vote for the person that they connect with the most socially. And I think out of the 3, like we talked about them at Final Tribal, Carson's earnestness and his young sweetness gets sort of drowned out by the 2 people that he's sitting next to, who are also deeply earnest and, will be just as endearing to the jury. I think that his age is really going to work against him. I think that compared to a drug counselor mom and a small business owner, people who are like far older than him, who have lived more life, I think that the jury will maybe want to give the money to them. I think that because they're not highlighting Carson as flashily in the edit, maybe this is why I feel this way. His moves perhaps are not as flashy, and I'm not sure that he'll be able to articulate those small the smaller, like the little chess moves that he's doing to like the moves to get Lauren and Jamie to vote with him and Jam Jam last week. Like, I'm not sure that that is going to be something that the jury cares as much about as some of the other things that Carolyn and Jam Jam are going to be able to bring up. I do think that he still has absolutely got a chance to win the game. Like you said about Carolyn, I think he's the lowest of the front runners, but I do think that in my mind, when I was watching the episode both last week and this week, I was not thinking of him as the front runner of the game. I was thinking of him as part of Tika. And that's just my personal opinion.
Yes. Well, I mean, look, there's a reason why we have different guests on every week. We need different perspectives. I think slightly disagree with the idea that similar games mean that the social game, kind of takes forefront. I don't know that that always holds true. If anything, I think a lot of the time, similar games, I think it depends on the game. Like if it was a strategic cutthroat game, then I think the more strategic player tends to be rewarded more. If it was a very like social game, kind of like socially dominant, then I think the social player wins out a little more. Like whichever game that the pair of them played, I think whoever represents that game more, I think is going to be rewarded.
Okay, but I
do think that in this case, it's kind of both,
Mhm.
right? Like, so I don't know that I would say that Tika like strategically really outmaneuvered everyone. They did, but not like in a like super like twisty way.
Mhm.
But they also didn't just rest on social connections. They also strategically maneuvered. So I think that like their game and their success rested on both social connection and strategic maneuvering. And so I don't know who really comes out. That's why I feel like it might come
It's
down to
exciting.
relationships. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting.
I'm excited for the finale. This is the first finale that I've been like excited about in the new era. Honestly, like I'm thrilled. I can't wait to see what happens. Like I just have no idea what's gonna happen. And the thing about Survivor is because you go into the finale with 5 people, like you usually maybe that's what it is because there's 5 people going into the finale and so much gameplay happens over the course of 2 hours. Like I might go in rooting for someone and then they are out first and then somebody who I was completely discounting has an incredible end of the run and wins and you're like, "Wait, what even happened?" But I feel like there is a clear path for 4 out of these 5 people to win and I will be satisfied based off
Mhm.
of what I've seen over the course of the season.
Yeah. Well, uh,
Where good things happen.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Wait, what a full tilt boogie. Full tilt boogie, Taran.
Full tilt boogie is a state of mind.
What's the state of my I feel like we've been full tilt boogie on this podcast.
we have been full tilt boogie all the way with epic music.
You've always been my number one.
I can do anything at this point.
Oh boy. All right. Anyway. That's what we have. That was the Stockwatch for the week.
Yay.
Yeah.
Awesome. It was fun to get to talk to you. I didn't get to do any of the drops for BB Can 11.
All right. No need to brag. Jeez.
Well, I was working during the time of the drops, so I wasn't able to do them. But as Jared said, I guess I didn't miss much. The only thing I missed was discussing with you. So
All right.
Here
You
we
know what,
are.
Maggie? You're my number one.
You've always been my number
You've
one.
always been
You
my
know?
number one.
I knew it. I knew I could get you.
I
Flattery,
just didn't want to say it publicly. Jeez. All right.
flattery will get you everywhere with Taran, everybody. Keep that in mind.
All right. Well, that's what we have for you this week. I will be back next week for the finale of Survivor 44.
Woo.
And then 90-minute episodes next season. So that'll be interesting. But then after the finale, of course, Big Brother coming up this summer. Actual real Big Brother with real live feeds and things that we will probably be mad about, but you know, mad and content with the fact that we can watch and be mad and not just be mad. So that's exciting.
No, things that we will, you know what it is? At least we will have passion.
Yes.
It was the most passionless season.
Mm.
And I came on the round table and rated the winner a 1.
Yep.
Okay. And I
I wonder if
still
that's happened before. I wonder if Josh got in one. He might have.
the golden apple.
I don't know. Maybe not that early.
Believe it or not, when Josh played, I was graduating from college, so I didn't even watch RJP yet. Crazy.
Wow.
Maybe I should go back and watch that Stockwatch.
Maybe. All right. Well, that's what we have. You can, of course, find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong. I'll be watching the finale live, all, I believe, 3 hours of it. So you can come hang out with me during the finale. Should be a fun time. And then, again, we'll be rating the winner, as well as, the other final 5 and how they played in the finale. And that'll be fun. So check that out. You can find all kinds of other stuff. Just head over to my Twitter at Armstrong Taran. I'll usually tweet this stuff out. That's about what I've got. Maggie, what do you got going on?
What do I have going on? Not a lot. Oh, there was an announcement for Temptation Island season 5. We have a premiere date. So hopefully Hot Dummies on Islands with me and Kirsten for Temptation Island will be back in your feed very soon. So get ready for
Sounds
that.
tempting.
I think you've made that joke every time I brought up the Temptation Island podcast.
It's like how Jeff says sandwiches.
Sure.
What sandwiches? Oh my god.
Icepack asked who left in the Survivor draft. I don't know, but I do know that Taran has Carson, which is very convenient that he's been rating him so high. Conspiracy theories.
Look, Stockwatch ratings don't mean anything in the draft. It just matters who wins.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
If you win the draft, do you think that it is going to have an asterisk next to your name because there was insider trading because Carson put out merch? Like, do you think that is like illegal? Like,
I do only have Carson because he put out merch.
I watched it. I remember. Like, is there going to be an asterisk? Be like that has to be like illegal somehow, like in the actual like stocks of the world.
I think, to be fair, I think that makes up for the fact that I probably would have picked Franny if they hadn't removed her pet peeve from her bio, which I discovered apparently, that there was a little bit of a mishap there. So, we'll see. We'll see. I think this was I think Puya. Yeah, I think Puya would jam probably.
Okay, we'll see who wins.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we have for you. Thank you all so much for joining us here today, and I will see all of you next time.